Zimbabwean journalist and activist Hopewell Chin'ono was on Monday taken into police custody after authorities broke into his home. He's held on accusations of inciting public violence ahead of mass protests planned for the 31st of July. Chin'ono is one of the voices that have called for the anti-government protests after it emerged that some government officials were participating in underhand dealings. After Chin'ono was taken from his home, media outlets, journalists and citizens took to social media to call for his release, many of them stating that journalism is not a crime. Author and filmmaker Tsitsi Dangarembga took a different route. She staged a solo demonstration calling for his release. Chin'ono had his bail application denied on Friday. Tsitsi joins us now on Skype to tell us more. Tsitsi, thank you for your time and thank you for joining us on Weekend Dawn. Just tell us how your one-woman protest went when you embarked on this protest a few days ago.
Well, I heard that Hopewell had been arrested and taken away from his home, and the video circulated on social media. And I saw that the door had been broken, the window had been broken, and it just seems so wrong. We all know in Zimbabwe, and other people in other parts of the world also know, that Hopewell has been doing some investigating of the alleged corruption in Zimbabwe. And he did produce evidence, and he had been warned by the spokesperson of ZANU-PF, which is the ruling party, that if he did not stop, there would be consequences. And he was also warned by the youth wing of the party and told to stop his investigations. Everything was denied, and he continued with increasing amounts of evidence. And after that, they broke into his home and they arrested him. And my sense of justice as a citizen of Zimbabwe who wants a prosperous and free and just Zimbabwe, and also as a media practitioner myself, where I have to defend freedom of speech as part of my professional rights, I felt I couldn't just sit by and stand and watch and not do anything. It's also my nature that if I feel strongly about something and I feel it's right to act, I look for a way to act. And for me, a one-woman protest is also a way to show Zimbabweans that it is possible to do things. Zimbabweans live under a weight of fear at the moment, and everybody is just focused very narrowly on getting by each day, getting enough food, being able to get out, do what they have to do, go home and sleep safely with no one banging on their door, demanding things from them, extorting fines from them. And I just wanted to say that it still is possible to do something. Now, people might say, okay, Tsitsi, you're privileged and you live in a quiet neighborhood, and all those things are true. But I still feel that wherever we are, we can do a small thing. I think some of the protests that have happened have tended to be confrontational. And I think that in this part of the world, we have a history of confrontation, which goes back to our liberation struggles and even beyond, to tribal and ethnic struggles and conflicts before. And we have this culture, at least in Zimbabwe, of a boasting culture where you're constantly singing about how wonderful you are and what you can do to the other person. So I think that all this has led to a confrontational culture. And I do think it must be possible to show that one disagrees very strongly with something without actually going out and being confrontational. So those were some of the motives that pushed me to go out on that solo demonstration.
And how has the solo demonstration been received? Have you got a lot of people supporting you? Can we expect another one? What's that been like in terms of the response?
The response has been interesting. I've had a huge response on social media. In about a day and a half, I added about 2,000 followers on Twitter, which was actually wonderful. But the traditional press is absolutely silent. I haven't had any response from the traditional press. And I think this just reflects what I was saying about the culture of fear that we have here. Because Hopewell has produced evidence that there has been corruption at high circles on a massive scale in Zimbabwe, especially around COVID-19 relief, but also increasingly around other issues. But we have not heard much of this in most of the traditional press. So I would say that the press is also very fearful. And I might even deduce from that that many sections of the press are captured in one way or another.
Let's talk about COVID-19, the pandemic in Zimbabwe. Do you think government is doing enough to address the issue and make sure people aren't getting infected or spreading the virus?
Well, my first protest a couple of months ago was on the issue of COVID-19. And the subject of that protest was a hospital that had been funded by government, as it turned out at the time, to be a private COVID-19 hospital. And a couple of billion Zimbabwean dollars had been invested in this by government. There was an outcry, which I was also part of. And government, the people who had been given this grant, then returned the hospital to government. It now turned out that I was quite ill myself at that time. My doctors were not sure what the problem was, but I had severe respiratory distress, and it was difficult for me to get treatment because everywhere I went, they wanted a COVID-19 certificate to show that I was not COVID-19 positive. But it was difficult to get that COVID-19 certificate because there were very few places which were offering it. And one of the ones, the public one, was actually closed at the time. And so my doctor said that she had heard that this institution that had gone backwards and forwards between government and a private player and then back to government was open. So I went there and I told them I'd come for treatment. They let me in. And I went to about 3 places, 3 different people who kept on telling me, oh, go over there, they might be able to help you. And it turned out that it was closed. And so when I asked when it would be open, they couldn't tell me. They said I should ask the Ministry of Health. And I wasn't able to follow up on that. I eventually was able to get a chest x-ray done through a friend who directed me somewhere. And on that day, my temperature was 37 degrees. So it was touch and go as to whether they would let me into the institution, but I was able to. And that's how I recovered. And so when I was well again, I just thought that I had to demonstrate about this issue. And so my first demonstration was at that hospital against the way government was handling the pandemic here. And the poster actually read that the Zimbabwe COVID-19 response is slaughter. So no, I don't think that government is handling the COVID-19 pandemic well at all. And it's not just an issue of what they are doing now in response to the pandemic, but it's also an issue of what they have been doing in the health sector for many years, in fact, since independence. The news that is coming out is quite horrifying of how little has been invested in the health sector. And at the moment, many hospitals are closed. In others, only parts of them are working. The service that is available to patients is deplorable. The private health sector is working to some extent, but it is out of the reach of most Zimbabweans. Many institutions are asking for $2,000 deposits if you go with COVID symptoms.
Can I come in there? Sorry, I just want to go back to what happened with Hopewell and the general speaking out with things like corruption and issues that come to handling COVID-19. Are you not scared, or other people supporting you not scared to speak out and address the corruption issues within Zimbabwe, specifically with the monies that has been allocated for saving lives for COVID-19?
Thank you. I'm glad you came back to that because, you see, what Hopewell did by exposing and gathering evidence around alleged corruption with respect to COVID-19 is that the two issues came together, the health scandal and the corruption scandal. And so government was really being put on the spot with respect to a wide spectrum of issues concerning the way it's governing in Zimbabwe. And so that, of course, made Hopewell very vulnerable to pushback from many sectors of government. Of course, people in the health sector. The government had formed a COVID-19 body to deal with the pandemic, and there were many high-level people, most of them not medical practitioners in the beginning, but high-level people from the ranks of ZANU-PF and the military who were on that panel. And so by bringing these two issues together, corruption and health, Hopewell was really pointing a finger at some of the key players in the Zimbabwean government.
Tsitsi, what next now? Before I let you go, what happens next? Now that Hopewell's bail was denied yesterday, can we expect more protests from your side? Can we expect something to be done to try and get him out of jail?
I know that they are going to definitely apply and for relief, and they will probably do that on Monday. I'm not sure. The tactic seems to be that the authorities want Hopewell in jail on the 31st and leading up to the 31st, because his charge is inciting people to public violence. Now, what he did ask people to do was to stand up and protest against corruption. And so by equating protest to inciting against violence, the government seems to be making it clear that in Zimbabwe, citizens are not allowed to protest. Now, it's up to the citizens to go out and show them that the Constitution of Zimbabwe gives us a right to protest peacefully. And I really do hope that people will come out in support of themselves to tell the government that certain things are simply not acceptable. And it's wonderful that Hopewell has been part of the movement that has been pushing this. But he's in jail now, and we have to make sure that we validate what he was saying, that the people of Zimbabwe do have a rightful grievance and a rightful, they do have the right to go out and let the government know peacefully that such things should not continue.
Tsitsi, thank you for your time. Her name is Tsitsi Dangarembga. She's a filmmaker. She staged a solo demonstration calling for journalist Hopewell Chin'ono's release after he was taken by police from his home on Monday on accusations of inciting public violence ahead of mass protests planned for the 31st of July.